A lot of stories.
So, good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to our session on Sunday Speaking Series. And as you see, the topic for today is storytelling magic. Unleash your inner narrator. So, we are going to move ahead with this topic, which is organized by Shubh Language Academy in partnership with the French House Jaipur. And today we are going to look at this art of how to express ourselves. And I'm sure you will have a lot of things to say, and you will also have your own stories to share with us. So it's going to be an interactive session. I'll try to speak in the initial part of it, and then we will open up the session for any kind of discussions, any kind of questions. So let's move ahead. Now, first and foremost, the point that comes to our mind is, what is storytelling? Now, storytelling is an art of sharing a narrative. It could be real, it could be fictional, it could be something that we have cooked up, or it can be something that is true, which really exists, and it's there in the society, it's there in our entourage, and we have known this. So the art, how you express it, how you share it with others, is what storytelling is all about. It is important to engage, inspire, and connect with an audience. It has been an essential part of human conditioning communication for centuries. We have always loved listening to stories as kids. You know, when we were kids, we would listen to stories which were shared by our grandparents. We would all flock around them, would sit with them, and would travel in those stories to an imaginary world that allows people to share knowledge, emotions, and experiences in a compelling way. When I say compelling, it is engaging. Now, in today's time, we see that storytelling, it goes beyond words. We can see it in terms of content creation, which is on YouTube, a big platform that has come. Also, we see in terms of advertising, marketing, reality shows. Everywhere, storytelling plays a big role. It taps into human emotions. It makes the messages more memorable and relatable. A well told story can educate, persuade, and entertain, making it a powerful tool in teaching, marketing, leadership, and of course, in our daily conversations. I'd like to talk to you about my friend Nikesh, my childhood friend Nikesh. You know, in his childhood, there was a tragic event that happened. He lost his parents, and as a result, he had to spend his childhood with his aunt. So he was raised by his aunt. His aunt, she was a lady who was very disciplined. She was someone who had a lot of values, ethics, morals, but she was someone who was very authoritative. She was very dominating. In his childhood, he wanted to flourish, he wanted to blossom, but because of his aunt, he couldn't do that. Well, you understand, a child who's 5 years old and doesn't get love and affection, he cannot blossom, he cannot bloom. That was his fate. Well, his life continued. He went to school as anyone else would. Something that was interesting for him was English, but it was a nightmare for him. To speak English was never his cup of tea. He always tried, struggled, but never could really make any progress in English. The simple fear of unknown, the simple fear of unknown, and what this unknown was the fear of being judged, the fear of making mistakes. It did not ever give him this hope to move ahead in English. Well, I'd like to tell you one of his experiences that he narrated me almost 20 years back. As a child, he was asked once to go onto the stage and to say something in English. Well, he stayed there for his public speaking. His hands trembled, his heart raced. He was in sweat completely. He opened his mouth. He stood there for 2 minutes. He got down, finally relieved. He thought it was all over. The moment he got down from the stage, he saw his teacher come towards him. He thought his teacher would applaud him, but to his dismay, the teacher asked him, Nikesh, you did not even speak a single word. What did you do all this while? For those 2 minutes, you were completely silent. And Nikesh, he was taken aback. Oh, really? I didn't say anything? I thought I said everything. Well, you see, such was his condition. He couldn't utter a single word. That night, he couldn't sleep. He turned and twisted in his bed. He cried. He cried. And that was an eye opener for him. That how this language is important, but more than that, he had to overcome his fears. Well, to cut the long story short, today we see Nikesh, from a young child who couldn't speak English, works in an MNC. And what he does, he trains people in English. He has wonderful command over English, and he is leading a wonderful and a successful life. Well, that was a little story about Nikesh, my childhood friend. So that was a little story I wanted to share with all of you. Well, I can be very honest with you. There's no such friend like Nikesh that I have from my childhood. It was a story that I just created before this session to engage you, to tell you as to how storytelling can impress and engage people. This was a little activity to tell you when we narrate any story, it has to have certain elements. We're going to look at those elements in this session, but before that, I'll just quickly give you a little glimpse of some elements that I used in this story. When I talked about my friend, I set the context by telling you all that my childhood friend. The moment I say my childhood friend, we as listeners are transported into a world of reality, a real world. Yes, of course, the one who is telling us is not lying to us and is going to tell us something true. So when I say my childhood friend, you are transported in my childhood and you see people who are there in my childhood. There is also something that we call in storytelling tangent offshoot. The moment I was telling a story about Nikesh, I talked about his aunt. His aunt, who was a lady of domination, of authority. She was disciplined, she had values, but she did not let Nikesh flourish, blossom, or bloom. That sets an image about Nikesh's childhood in your mind. The very outside was an emotional one, wherein I said Nikesh lost his parents when he was very small. That gives an image of this boy, Nikesh, that how poor, how helpless, and how solitude was there in his childhood. And he couldn't do anything because his aunt would not let him do anything that he wanted. Also, we see that there is a happy ending in the story. We always want people to succeed in their lives. And that's why a happy ending is an ending that shows how impressive the whole narration could be. These were some of the elements I wanted to share with you at the very outset by sharing this story of Nikesh. I hope you like the story. Did you?
Yes, I we like.
Oh, yes, sir.
Right. So that was just to tell you that.
More than the story, we like the way you told the story because it's a very simple. You can call it's a fact. You're describing a friend, but in the form of a story. So the way you
Actually,
narrated it, it was simply superb.
The narration was extremely extraordinary.
thank you, Shampa. Thank you, Shubhashish. We will see in this little journey that how narration plays a big role. We have the content, but how you deliver it. Would you do it on a fast pace? Would you do it on a slow pace? It all depends on the kind of content you want to share, the kind of ambience you want to create, and more than that, the kind of audience you have in your entourage. That all defines as to what kind of pace you're going to take up. That is a part of the elements that we are going to delve into today. So, moving ahead, I'll quickly tell you about the reasons as to why we see that storytelling has come a big way in the contemporary times. We see even marketing agencies, the advertising sales, everyone is working on storytelling. What is more important today is not selling products, it is selling dreams and emotions. Of course, you must have seen advertisements of cars wherein we do not sell a car, we sell the comfort of traveling with your complete family together, the joy of taking your parents, your grandparents on a trip. So these are the messages that are sent, are sold, and these are the things that they sell more than what would the product sell. So that's how the new generation, the new contemporary times, we see things have changed the shape from products to emotions to dreams. And why? Because dreams and emotions, they play a major role than the products themselves. Same is the story. The story was a message of not to give up. But more than that, the characters, the situations, the ups and downs that we saw in the story were more impressive. The whole plot of the story was engaging. It was set in a way that not only it inspires us, but also we are hooked onto it from the very beginning. Well, now when we hear a story, our brain stimulates the events as they're happening to us. I'm sure the moment we heard the story of Nikesh, we were traveling with Nikesh. We lived in his past as a childhood, and then we moved when he was a young boy standing on the stage, so frightful. Trembling were his hands and legs, and he was hesitant. And in the end, we see how he came out as a successful protagonist of the story. So we want to travel with people. We want to see their ups and downs, their journeys, in fact, and we have to relate ourselves to these journeys as well. If we see the next part, we see that these are the stories that make us laugh, cry, or feel suspenseful. These are the emotional triggers that are generated because we see these characters who are struggling and they have their triumphs. We see everything through the lens of the story and we somehow connect ourselves with the story. That's why it is very rightly said. Whatever we share, we have to give some kind of connection to the one who is listening. If you don't give that connection, then there is a complete disconnect and this person doesn't enjoy, doesn't feel connected to the story, and then the message is failed. It is very important to allow the safe emotional expression. We see that protagonists, the main characters in our story, they find their comfort, whereas in some they are completely loaded with grief. We also see that these protagonists, they inspire us, they motivate us. And in the end, there is a connection and a belonging that gets developed. They remind us that we are not alone in our experiences. Of course, as individuals, when we have struggled our life in learning languages, it could be English, it could be any other language, any other foreign language. And when we were asked to do a presentation in that language, we trembled as well. We were hesitant, our heart raced, and we were into sweat. We have gone through all this, and this experience brings us closer to the protagonist, and we understand his situation or her situation in a better way. Well, this was a little layout that I wanted to set before moving ahead in terms of storytelling. Now, today in this session, we are going to look at some of the techniques to start and end a beautiful story. The first technique is called the hook. Hook is a powerful opening that immediately grabs the attention. You know how you could say it. For example, they say you get only one chance to change your life. Mine came when I missed my flight. Now, everyone is intrigued and curious to know what happens next. So, there is this hook element that you have dashed in your story. When you start your story with this, everyone is hooked onto it and is intrigued and curious to know what comes next. So, always ensure that you have a beginning, not always, but largely it should be hooking the audience. In contemporary times, when we see people have such a small and a short attention span, we want to give them something that engages them, that is enticing, and something that fascinates them to be there with us. Next way of starting our story is the enticing setup. Now, it is a very interesting problem or a mystery that gets created at the very outset. For example, every night Sarah's phone received a text from an unknown number. The messages knew her secrets. Now, when we say this, the number is an unknown number, she doesn't know who this person is. But what happens is that this unknown person knows everything about Sarah. Her ins and outs are known by this person. That also creates some kind of mysterious impact and conflict in our understanding, and we try to get closer to the story just to find the solution as to who this person is. So, the enticing setup draws the attention of the readers or the listeners, and they move closer to the protagonist along with the story. The emotional pull, it's a deeply set emotional moment that makes the audience feel something. The last words my grandfather said to me were, "Don't let fear stop you from living." I never understood them until today. Now, these kind of statements, which are set up for creating an emotional story, are those memories that you bring out from the protagonist's side and you relate with those stories in a better way. The moment I said Nikesh, who lost his parents in his childhood, there's an emotional bond with Nikesh. We have a concern for Nikesh. We have a softness for Nikesh. We have an inclination for Nikesh. Why? Because there is an emotional pull. We have to ensure that if we really want to have the attention of our listeners, we have to create this emotional pull. Now, when I say we have to create, it is not always necessary to create it. You have to see that everything that you're putting across makes sense to them, and at times, the emotional pull, which can be really amplified, at times it goes unnoticed. I could have simply said, Nikesh lost his parents in his childhood, and I could have moved ahead with the story. But I really stressed on the fact, Nikesh, he lost his parents in his childhood. It was traumatic for him. I could always add on more compliments, more sentences to it to emphasize on the situation, to create that whole emotional pull in a stronger way. Moving ahead, another way to do is to create the relatable moment. It begins with an experience that the audience can relate to. For example, we've all had that one embarrassing moment in school, isn't it? Mine involved tripping on stage in front of 500 people. Can you imagine? The moment I say this, I'm sure we as listeners, we develop some kind of connection. Oh, yes, every time I get onto the stage, I have this fear. I shouldn't trip, I shouldn't trip, I shouldn't trip. But this person who has tripped and says it all in front of everyone sets the whole context in some kind of relation. And we get connected to this person. So, this relatability is very important to tell that you are not the only one. I went through this experience as well. Moving ahead to the next element, the what if scenario. We can always start with an imaginative question so that the audience gets into the thinking mode. Their brainstorming process starts. For example, what if you woke up one day and no one remembered who you were? How would you feel? And then give a pause of, let's say, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Let the audience think. What would they do? How would they feel? How would they react? What would the world be like for them? So these kind of what if questions, they create a scenario. Not only they contextualize as to what you want to say, but at the same time, there is a thinking pattern that already starts in the mind of all the readers or the listeners. Moving ahead with the next one, we can also have the rule of three. Now, the rule of three is something that creates rhythm, it emphasizes and creates an impact. For example, if I have to say about someone, let's say Sarah, I'm talking about Sarah. She was alone. She was scared. She was ready to fight. Now, these kind of alliterations that you see, they're very impactful because they create a continuous rhythm in the minds of the listeners. And they see repetitive actions which are happening again and again. She was alone. You instantly imagine someone who's alone. She was scared. You get the element of her being fearful. And she was ready to fight. You see the warrior, the fighter in her. So these kind of quick, short sentences, they reinforce the character, the protagonist, and his behavior, his personality or her personality in your mind. And that's what the idea is, to paint the characters. And how does painting happen? This painting simply happens by the words, the impactful words that you would dash in, you would toss in. You know, when we used to read novels, or when people used to write novels, let's say 300 years ago, 500 years ago, there was no sense of photography. We couldn't have taken pictures back then. So, how did they create magic? They would write beautiful words, they would express the characters with words. If they're talking about their dresses, they're talking about their appearances, they would dash in words which would transport us as readers, as listeners to that era, and we would start imagining. This is the power of words. This is the power of description. So here, the rule of three talks about the descriptive part of storytelling. Moving ahead, the unexpected twist. Well, it is just the beginning, and you are seeing the twist. For example, as I stepped onto the train, I saw my reflection in the window, except the reflection smiled back at me. Now, isn't it shocking? The moment I start my story, and I see that the moment I have stepped onto the train, this reflection of mine is smiling back to me. Oh, that can be scary. And that's how the story starts. And that is something that I get connected to. Moving ahead with another element, the slow reveal. At times, it's also very important to generally build your suspense in a gradual manner. You would add elements slowly and steadily over time. For example, I noticed something strange about the house. The door was unlocked, the lights flickered, and the clock had stopped ticking. The step by step reveal makes the audience eager to know as to what is going to happen next. Now, again, we are thrown into the world of imagination. We are in front of that strange house. We start to see the door which is unlocked. It opens up. We can also dash in some sound to it, and the lights flickered. We can add on the sound of light with words. And the clock had stopped ticking, and there was pin drop silence. And then there is some silence. Now, silence speaks volumes. I'm sure you know that in terms of storytelling. Well, moving ahead with the next point, we have the flashback. This starts in the middle or end of the story and then jumps back at the beginning. Now, how it happens? As I stood at the edge of the cliff, I thought back to the moment that led me here. So the starting happens wherein we are at the starting point of the story, but we do a time travel. Why is it important? Because it creates instant intrigue among the audience who would like to know how the story got to this point. So we see the protagonist, the main character of the story, who is standing at the edge of the cliff, and he starts to recall his past. And that's how we travel in the past through this little narration of the protagonist. Moving ahead, we have the last element for us to start a story. This is the cliffhanger start. Now, a cliffhanger, as the name suggests, it is something that we are hanging onto the cliff. It is something which opens with a tense, dramatic moment, leaving the audience desperate for the answers. For example, I ran as fast as I could. If they caught me, it would all be over. We imagine the main character running, being chased by many people, 10 persons, or maybe more than that. And the protagonist says, if they caught me, it would all be over. Who are they? Why are they chasing him? And why would it all be over if they chased him? Well, we would like to know what happens next, and that keeps us engaged and connected onto the story. Well, these were some of the elements that we can always use to start our impressive storytelling. Now, these were just the initial part of it. Now, moving ahead with the endings. What about the ending? Can we do any kind of ending? Yes, we can. But what if they were very specific ones? In such a situation, we will latch on to these kind of endings of storytellings. The first one is, again, the cliffhanger ending. The previous one was cliffhanger starting, but this one is cliffhanger ending. What do we mean by that? So when we talk about the cliffhanger ending, it leaves the audience hanging with an unresolved mystery or tension. Well, in our storytelling, we have largely seen, and they lived happily ever after. And that's how we have seen that ending should always be beautiful. Well, such is not the life, nor are the real stories. So we can always keep the ending as an unresolved mystery or tension. For example, he picked up the phone, listened for a second, and his face went pale. Oh no. And the story finishes. Now, people would talk about it and they would say, we want more of it. Yes, of course, if there is a sequel to it, you can bring it out. But if but at times, if there isn't any, they're always thinking because something that is unfinished, it stays with us for a longer time. That's how the story works in a magical way for us with its impressive ending. Another one is the twist ending. Now, what happens in a twist ending? You're telling a story, and the story surprises the audience with an unexpected conclusion. What happens in this conclusion? She thought she had escaped until she saw her own face in the missing person report. So she had escaped, but she was all lost because she was reported missing. A shocking twist always makes a story unforgettable. You'd always recall it, you'd always remember it. The moment you talk about anything similar, this story would come up back in your memories. So if you really want that people should think about your stories or about your kind of narration, we can always dash in the twist ending. Moving ahead with another form of ending, the circular ending. Now, this story ends in the same place it began, but with a new perspective. For example, he started the journey feeling lost. When he started his journey, he was completely lost. He returned home, realizing he had found himself, which means the whole world that he traveled to find himself, he couldn't do that. But when he came back, he knew who he was. Well, the story started with the fact that in the quest of knowing who he was, he left his home. And when he came back at the same place, he got to know who he was. So he got to know who he was because the experiences that life threw onto him throughout his journey made him the person that he was in the end. So that's very important way to show that how there is a sense of completion and a deep meaning. Well, generally, we start with the point. The narration starts with a point. It can be an incident or a place, a village, a city that we're talking about. And how this place, the city, this village is the push factor to send the protagonist out from that place. But this protagonist comes back to this place after all this experience. That also shows the circular ending and that how our perspectives they change with passage of time. The places they are the same, they don't change, but what changes is our perspective towards those places. All right, moving ahead with the next ending, we have the moral lesson ending. These are the endings which always pass on a clear message or a takeaway. For example, and that's when I understood the most important thing in life isn't what we achieve, but who we share it with. So these are the messages that we can give to others, especially stories with moral lessons and learnings for young minds, for adolescents, for kids. If we want to tell them as to what is important in life and how they should see their life, these moral endings come as great help. Moving ahead, the next ending is the open ended conclusion. Now, in this kind of an ending, we see that it ends without fully resolving the story. We did see the previous one wherein there was an ending, but it wasn't resolved at all. But here we see that it is not fully resolved. We see some kind of solution, but not a complete one, leaving interpretation to the audience. They might imagine, okay, this might have happened afterwards. And that also helps people to think and create their own imagination about that story. For example, she opened the door and gasped. But what she saw, only she will ever know. So we as listeners or readers, we are intrigued to know, but what was that? Maybe she found her lover back. Maybe her, or anything for that matter, anything that she was longing for, anything and everything that she was yearning for, and she finds it when she opens the door. And that's how this ending, which is open-ended conclusion, gives a lot of creativity and imagination in the minds of all the listeners and the readers. Next, we see is the happy ending, something that we have seen a lot in, of course, in the Indian, I would say, Bollywood movie telling. Also, it is there. The storytelling always ends with a happy ending. Everything revolves nicely. It resolves nicely in the end, leaving the audience feeling satisfied. Now, our intention is to be satisfied. We all want a perfect end. Haven't you had this kind of an experience when you see the protagonist who moves just very close by his lover or the person whom he wanted to meet, and they just cross each other by inches, and we as readers or listeners or viewers are like, just turn around, look, he's there. And then they, don't meet each other, but of course at the end they would cross each other, they would meet each other, and that leads to a happy ending. Why? Because in the end, what our intention is to be satisfied. And there is a human connect to it. We want to see people succeed. We want to see people fulfill their dreams. If in that movie, in that story, there is a protagonist who wants to do something, we would be really happy to see this person succeed or win in the end. So, after years of struggle, he finally achieved his dream, proving that patience and hard work, it pays off. So we see, because people love hopeful and uplifting endings. We all are of that sort. No one would want catastrophe or deception or hopelessness in the end. But that's also a part of our reality. That's why we have seen other endings as well, wherein end is not such, it isn't beautiful, it's not pleasant, neither it is happy. It is something that is true. When the reality faces um, the kind of end it has to face because of the set criteria, we see this happens. All right, moving ahead with the next kind of ending, we have the sad ending. It ends in tragedy or loss. It leaves an emotional impact onto the listeners, viewers, and readers. For example, she waited at the train station every day, but he never came back. Silence. Some of the most powerful stories are those that make us cry, don't they? And that's the way of liberating ourselves from our own emotions. This is the power of storytelling. It can make you smile, it can make you laugh, and it can also make you cry. When we cry, we connect ourselves with the protagonists, with the characters of the story. And when we cry, we liberate ourselves from the emotions that we are holding in us. And I think that's the best way. If a story can make us cry, so we see that we also have the sad and the sad endings in our stories. Moving ahead with the next story, next ending, we see we have the call to action ending. Now, these kind of endings, they always encourage the audience to take an action or reflect after the story. For example, in the end, we can ask a question. So now I ask you, what's stopping you from chasing your dreams? Or at the end of the session, I can ask you, so now I ask you, what's stopping you to create your own beautiful story? So these kind of questions, when they are tossed in, you would find that they call for an action. Those who are listening, those who are reading, or those who are viewing, they get encouraged and they would want to take an action, and they get inspired and they are ready to act. I think these kind of endings are very important whenever there is a social message we want to pass on to our viewers. Well, these were some of the endings that we saw. Now, I'll quickly give you some powerful techniques for impressive storytelling in a nutshell, with all the starting and the ending in a complete glimpse so that you get a hang of it. So, as we said, we can start with the hook. It can be a shocking statement. For example, the world almost lost Albert Einstein before he became a genius. A thought provoking question. Have you ever wondered how one decision can change your entire life? It can be a vivid description which reads, Thunder roared as she ran barefoot across the cold, wet pavement. Or in the end, it can be a powerful quote which reads, The secret of a great story, make the audience feel something. And that's how you start your story. Another very important thing is having a strong narrative structure. Now, narrative structure comes with language, with your pronunciation, with your intonation, and this is something that comes along with the plot. Now, it's very important that we develop our language skills but at the same time, we also understand how a good narration unfolds. For example, every great story follows a structure. There is a beginning, there is something in the middle, and of course, there is an end. So, if I have to talk about the beginning, we establish the setting, we introduce the characters, and hint at the conflict. Now, there is some conflict, there is some problematic situation that is there at the beginning. Now, in the middle, we build this tension. There are obstacles and there are emotions, and we keep the audience invested and interested. At the end, we resolve this conflict. We reveal a transformation, or we leave a thought provoking conclusion. And that's how the story finishes. For example, a story that I can narrate at the beginning. A young boy dreams of winning a bike race. That's what the context. Now, about the middle part of it, he struggles through setbacks, his bike breaks, he loses confidence. But what about the end? He trains harder, fixes his bike, and wins the race, proving resilience matters more than talent. So that's how we show how this protagonist struggled and wins in the end. As I just said, we all love to see people win, don't we? And people love to see us win. And this passion that we infuse in the energy of a protagonist, it gets revealed through our excitement, our engagement. Moving ahead, next point about storytelling is show, don't tell. And how do we show? We show it with the right choice of words. We can simply say, she was scared. But what if I wrote, her hands trembled, her breath quickened, and a cold sweat formed on her forehead? Her heart raced. She was completely in despair. Now, when I say this description, it would create a better, a bigger, a more impactful image of our character in the minds of the readers or the listeners or the viewers, rather than putting just directly by saying she was scared. Now, this is again a part of storytelling, and that's why we say show, don't tell. So, when you show, you create an image. Next, develop relatable characters. Now, it's very important that our audience are glued on to these characters. So these characters could be flawed. They can have errors and problems and shortcomings. A genius inventor who lacks confidence. So I feel connected because I lack confidence too. Maybe that can be my thought. Driven by emotion, a father fighting against all odds to save his son. Oh, yes, we have seen people who do so. Or facing real struggles, a student battling self doubt before an important exam. Oh, yes, we all go through this self doubt. So, that kind of setup creates this relatable character for me, for us, for all of us. And we understand that it is not their story, it is our story. Moving ahead, we have the next point, which reads keep it simple and clear. Now, a great story doesn't have to be complex. Now, generally, we see that I have to toss in some complex jargons, words that are very complex. Please avoid doing that. It is not these words that are going to keep the audience engaged. It is rather the simplicity and the clarity of your thoughts of the story, and the message should be focused. Because at times we have seen if we toss in difficult jargons or terms, that would disinterest the audience and they would feel, oh, it is something that I cannot connect myself to. And that's why, for example, the story of the tortoise and the hare has a simple message: slow and steady wins the race. Avoid too many subplots or unnecessary characters that confuse the listeners. So you have to keep it simple. Maybe in your mind it is very clear. The moment you start to speak it out, you would find that it's not as clear as you had thought. So you have to ensure that the plot be simple and clear, and the terms that you're using should be absolutely pertinent with the story and the context. Moving ahead with a few more points, we have to use emotion to connect. Now, emotions are very important. The best stories make people feel something. You have to feel something. For example, the story of Nikesh that I narrated to you at the very outset. You thought about Nikesh. You had some sympathy for him. You had some concern for him. But I'm sure you were really thrilled to have heard about his success. In the end, he is someone who is leading the training department, wherein he is passing on information about how to talk and communicate in an effective manner. So we see his journey, and we are moving on to a roller coaster ride of emotions. We can have sadness, a soldier returning home to an empty house, laughter, a child mistaking a shampoo bottle for a drink, fear, a woman realizing she's not alone in her house at night, or inspiration, a man who fails 99 times but succeeds only the 100th try. That's again something very inspirational. We have to choose as to what kind of emotion we would want to put into our story. Maintaining a slow pace and flow. Now, there can be a fast pace and there can be a slow pace. It all depends on the kind of audience you have. It all depends on the kind of content you want to share. It all depends on the kind of ambience you want to create. For example, good pacing keeps the audience engaged. If I were to speak in a fast pace, there would be people who would not be so interested. So, especially when stories are narrated, you have to engage them. You have to give them time to soak themselves in the story and also let the story be soaked in them. For this kind of a process, you have to give pauses. You have to give the right intonation. The pronunciation has to be bang on. And that's how you move ahead with an impressive storytelling. For example, fast pace for action scenes. He sprinted through the forest, heart pounding, dodging branches. And if it were a slow pace story, you would say, she sat by the lake, watching the ripples spread across the water. So every kind of narration is dependent on the kind of content you would want to share and the kind of image you want to create to that scene or that specific part of that story. But yes, both have their own impact, and these impacts are totally useful provided that they are done in the right way. Next, we have something that calls for creation of suspense and curiosity. Now, we as human beings, we are always curious. We'd like to know what happens next, what is there in store for the character, and everything. So, an example, he held his breath. The door creaked open, but there was no one there. Or was there? Now, when you put in these kind of statements, we as listeners or readers or viewers, we are intrigued. We are curious to know what comes next. Or it can be a cliffhanger, and just as he was about to give up, he saw it. But what he saw changed everything. Now, that's very important that how we create suspense and curiosity. It comes with practice, and the kind of work we do so that we learn with passage of time how we can choose the right words which are more meaningful and which create more of impact. In the end, we can always add a surprise element. A predictable story is forgettable. A twist makes it more memorable. So something that you have predicted, oh, I'm sure he would have found his friend, the lost friend. Fair enough, you knew it. What if there was a twist? For example, a poor janitor in a school secretly funds a scholarship for students, only to reveal later that he was once a millionaire who lost everything. So everyone was wondering why this poor janitor he comes to applaud the students who were getting wonderful results, because we get to know that it was him who was funding their studies, because once he was a millionaire and who had lost everything, but he had still some funds with him. So these kind of surprise elements, they help us stay connected to the story. And in the end, we have a powerful closing. A strong ending leaves a lasting impression. So we have to choose one of the endings. It could be a lesson learned. And that's how I discovered that failure is just a stepping stone towards success. Or a dramatic twist. He walked away never knowing he had just met his long lost sister. Or, in the end, a call to action. So, what's stopping you from chasing your dreams? Come on, go for it. Something of this sort would always be a call to action. In the end, I would like to quickly tell you about the plot. Now, the plot is the structure and the flow. For example, it reveals the sequence of events. In your mind, everything should be logically and interestingly placed. You, as a storyteller, as a narrator, should know how your story is going to unfold. Of course, it can be on the spot, the way I did about Nikesh, but I had a little idea about the unfolding of the story. I knew about the characters, I knew about the little story, but things that I was saying on the spot without memorizing them so as to keep it natural. And the best part is you can take your pauses. The moment you think about it, the next sentence, you also give time to your audience to soak in the message and the story. So while the time is taken by them to understand what was just said, you get time to move ahead with the next sentence. But of course, you have to have a clear idea of the whole story. There has to be an introduction. For example, Cinderella is mistreated by her stepmother. There's a rising action, something that happens in a positive way. She meets the fairy godmother. There's a climax. She goes to the ball but loses her glass slipper. Falling action. There is a downfall in the story. The prince searches for the owner of the slipper, and there is a resolution. There is a problem solving point. Cinderella is found and lives happily ever after. So there we see a beautiful, happy ending, but it can change as per your interest. Now, why it matters? A plot, it matters because without a structured plot, the audience gets lost or bored, and we as narrators, even we don't know as to where we are heading. So the plot should be well rehearsed, it should be well developed, and it should be well practiced. Moving ahead, next, we see there are also parameters of tangent offshoots. Now, whenever you are doing or narrating a story, it's important that you understand that there are side characters, there are side situations that can be amplified a little bit so that we deviate from the main story and we create a background. For example, the story of Nikesh that I told to you, I did talk about her aunt, and I'm sure the moment I asked you, could you talk a little bit about her aunt, you all will be telling me that she's a lady who is stern, who is strict, who is disciplined, who has values and ethics and morals. But she is someone who is dominating, who is very authoritative. So these are the characters that we bring out of these of course these characters as well in this in the story. Now it is important to develop these side characters as well and these side situations. Why? Because they would create the whole fabric of the story in a very beautiful way. For example, if I were to bring the aunt back in the story, I would put her at the end. During one of his presentations, Nikesh saw someone peeping through the glass door. And guess who was this person? That was her aunt, who was so happy and thrilled about Nikesh's success. And Nikesh really felt happy to have mastered the art of speaking, which he didn't have when he was a child. That's how you can complete the circle. A circle completion can also start with a person who had a different kind of a connection with the protagonist, but in the end changes. So that completes the circle, and that also shows the way story unfolds. And we as human beings, we do not like things which are incomplete. It stays with us for a longer time. But yes, of course, if you really want the story to stay with the audience, you can leave it incomplete. But if you really want that they be satisfied and they be happy, then of course the ending could be dashed in a way wherein a tangent offshoot that was inserted at the beginning finishes with a beautiful ending towards the conclusion part of it. And in the end, we have two quick stories that I would like to read out for you. The first one is The Lost Puppy. Now, the theme that we are going to delve into is kindness and responsibility. One rainy evening, I'm going to talk to you about Emma. Emma was walking home when she heard a soft whimper. She looked around and saw a small, wet puppy hiding under a bench. His big, sad eyes stared at her. Emma carefully picked him up. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. She took the puppy home, dried him off, and gave him food. The next day, she put up posters around the neighborhood. A few hours later, a little boy named Jack called. "That's my puppy, Max!" he cried happily. When Jake arrived, Max jumped into his arms, wagging his tail. Emma smiled. She was sad to say goodbye, but she knew she had done the right thing. Now, you see, when we are Even writing a part of story, creative story writing is a part of curriculum these days for school students, even at different levels. We have to ensure that there are there's direct speech. For example, in the story you see, Emma says, "Don't worry, little one," or you see this little boy Jake. He says, "That's my puppy, Max." Now these um, direct speech sentences, they create a clean and a direct impression in the minds of the readers or the listeners because they imagine that character then and there. So please ensure that whenever you are narrating a story or you are writing a story, have the direct speech over there. It could always be this way as well. The way we talked about Nikesh's story, he gets down and he perhaps says to his teacher, "So, ma'am, did you like my presentation?" The teacher replied, "No, but you didn't say anything." When you put in these kind of direct speech sentences, you are actually listening to these people speak then and there in front of you. So that works in a magical way. So please ensure that you use these kind of direct speech sentences. And in the end, we have one last story that I would like to read out for you. The story is The Magic Paintbrush. This is a story that talks about creativity and gratitude. Liam loved to paint. One day, he found a shiny golden paintbrush at an old market. The seller smiled and whispered, "It's special." That night, Liam painted a red apple. The next morning, the apple became real. He painted a bird. It flew away. Liam was excited. He painted food for the hungry and flowers in the park. But when a greedy man forced him to paint gold, Liam refused. Instead, he painted a giant wave, washing the greedy man away. From that day on, Liam only used his brush to help others. Well, the moral of the story is true talent is best used for good. And now, in this story, if you see, we could have simply said paintbrush. We emphasized on the words shiny golden paintbrush. The moment I say shiny golden paintbrush, in your imagination, there's a paintbrush which is not an ordinary one, but it is shiny and golden. Also, we see that there is direct speech. It's special. So these kind of involvements help the readers to stay connected and feel that there are events that are unfolding around him or her. Well, that was it from my side about storytelling in a creative way. If you have any questions or any comments or anything you'd like to dash in, please feel free to tell us so that we can exchange and we can develop that part of it as well.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, so I can see Shubhashish. Shubhashish would like to say something on that.
Yes, good afternoon, sir, and thank you again. Like from today's session, I learned the basic techniques, a technicality of the story where you have explained the parts. I don't know how to technically form or narrate a story. So it was, a wonderful learning experience. I would like to share two things.
Yes.
Uh, and I have exactly 2 minutes because I have to rush. So I have to
No
unfortunately leave your session 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes early. First thing is
worries.
there are two subjects in which storytelling can be used as an effective medium of teaching. One is English or any language. So storytelling enhances the teaching, makes teaching more effective. Another is history. History is a very boring and scaring subject. We are so scared of so many facts we have to remember and we get confused. But if history is taught in the form of storytelling, there is nothing better like that. That is what I
Absolutely.
personally feel. That's the first thing I would like to share. And second thing is when you were telling about imagery and like while telling a story, that image should be formed that you should be lost in the world of the story. Okay, then it's a powerful story. Now, if we go to story writing, so I would like to mention two authors who actually use this. One is our Indian R.K. Narayanan,
Yes.
wonderful, and Mulkraj Anand. When I read
Yes.
stories of these two people, the plot is very simple, extremely simple, but the narrative technique and imagery, the thing that you will feel the things are happening in front of your eyes.
True.
So their writing appears like storytelling. The narrative is so powerful. And
Yes.
storytelling, I would also point out one thing that I feel, even in movies, it's very important. I would like to highlight one movie, that is Three Idiots, which is
Mhm.
basically told like a story.
Yes.
And there we also see how storytelling can be an effective tool for a film, for a movie.
Mhm.
So these are the three aspects of storytelling I wanted to share with you. And
Yes.
thank you once again. Now I'll just leave the meeting with a broken heart, but I will, for the rest, I will see the recording, obviously.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Shubhashish. Your points are totally relevant, and what you have just said, it really makes sense with this topic of today. And you can definitely go and read these writers, these wonderful writers. And what you rightly say is the fact that they create an image for you. The moment you're reading their works, there is an image that starts to get painted in front of your eyes, and that's what the whole story is trying to say, and that is the success of that story. Thank you, Shubhashish. Anyone else would like to ask a question or anything you'd like to share in terms of your own storytelling, anything that you'd like to know, or you have your own set of experience about storytelling? Have you been doing it or anything of that sort? Yeah, I can. Yeah, there is. Yeah, we'll ask Shampa and then we'll ask Sabine Sheikh. So, Shampa, over
Yeah.
to you. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
Shampa. Yeah.
I do agree with what Shubhashish said right now.
Mhm.
And what I also feel that while listening to a story, we also get connected to that thing. Means I think like that there are so many readers in a one go. The writer is actually, I would rather say, stitching or taking the needle, and with the beads and all, we are kind of like
Mhm.
beads and all. That's another story he's creating.
Mhm.
Like listening to a story and then feeling, obviously, you will have a lot of emotions. It might be of us sadness. It might make you more. It may be an inspirational one, or it
Mhm.
may be igniting a small spark in you to do
Yes.
some work. So I kind like always feel like reading is something which creates an imaginary world in our brain. That is something what I feel is so important these days,
True.
because we are losing it. To
Yes.
be honest, nowadays, the more we are connecting, like most of the time, what we can see is that we are more into this gadget, either the laptop
Yes.
or whatever the gadgets we have. We go over there, we browse, and mostly we go and check the videos and all. So
Yes.
watching the things is what we are doing more and more and more, rather than writing down or penning down the stories. Even we
Yes.
have a lot of stories, like the one you said, no, missing the flight. This time
Yeah.
I'd rather share a small story.
Yes.
While I was there in Delhi, I was
Mhm.
there. My daughter shifted over there. She's studying her masters in Noida, Amit
Mhm.
University, and I was there to, you know, catch the flight to Kolkata. So in the morning, as obviously, I thought my flight was at around 12. So I was thinking that, oh, I have a lot of time.
Right.
Everything was okay. Everything was going fine, and we started at around 8:50, something like that. So I thought I'll reach max to max by 10,
Mhm.
and that was not a rush hour. Also,
Right.
very happy on the way, like moving ahead, and suddenly, like reaching nearly 40 kilometers, just nearly to the airport, I could see only a trail of cars, and not an inch it was moving, not single. Then started like, moment, I could feel a drop of, this coming down from my forehead. I could feel it. Okay, so this is the time. It's clicking. It's the time is ticking up and up. And my
Right.
driver told me, "Ma'am, this is the only way I can help you. That the car is not moving, and I'm not. I'm sure that it will not move for an inch." And this is that was Dolatabad somewhere. So
Uh-huh.
told me, what you can do is that you can check the this nearest metro. This is
Mhm.
the one, and you. My flight was from that was airport now something 3, and I'm not used to all these things. It was very new for me. Like, I asked someone, uh, and it was on a rush. I just went over there. I just, while I collected my ticket and I went inside, I was waiting for the metro, and it was like time was taking up. Five
Uh-huh.
minutes gone, 7 minutes gone. They said 20 minutes later, it's already nearly 11.
Uh-huh.
Nearly 11, and my flight is, I need to board by 12. And it was nearly 12, 11, and I was asking someone sitting nearby. I asked him that, do you think this metro will reach on time? And do you know that this is I need to go the airport. This is the gate number 2, and this is the flight number. And all I
Uh-huh.
was sharing with him, and that person just said, I don't know Hindi. Sorry, I don't know English. I said,
Okay.
okay, fine. I just suddenly I found someone else, and that person helped me, and she was very eager to help me. So I went
Uh-huh.
there. I just moved in, and I just arrived at, it was 11:25.
Okay.
From there, I'll have to walk, and they said that from here, this is the gate number. This is
Yes.
nearly 15, 20 minutes. You'll have to walk. I
Uh-huh.
didn't walk. I just ran and
Right.
ran and I ran and I covered it. I would rather say I was gasping. I did not
Uh-huh.
have this. I was breathless and all. So I
Yes.
just went over there and
You
they
got your
checked.
flight?
I checked in.
Uh-huh.
It was already 11:50.
Uh-huh.
And means I boarded the train and everything went at 11:50. I went
Uh-huh.
over there already. The announcements were, they were calling me.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so I just found myself and I
Uh-huh.
read and I boarded. It was 12. And after
Sure.
that, and I was the last person. You know what? I sat and I suddenly moved my head around and I saw that person on the same flight.
Oh.
Imagine. And that person was speaking in English. And he told me he doesn't understand English at all.
Shamba, that was beautiful. The whole narration of yours, we were traveling with you. We were indeed traveling with you, and the end was fantastic. You found the same person whom you saw in the metro
Yeah.
and found him. So that was beautiful. I mean, that is a real story, but it was very engaging indeed. So
He,
bravo for that. And
yeah.
we were a part of your journey. We wanted you to catch the flight. We wanted to see you catch the flight. So it happened, and you did that. So great for that.
My husband was calling me behind, and I did not pick up the call.
Uh-huh.
Once I boarded the flight, I just texted that yes, I boarded.
I've reached
When I handed
my
over
flight.
here, he said,
Great.
if you missed it, what would have happened?
Yeah,
I have boarded another flight. What was the hurry?
true, true, true. No, no, that's true. See, the way you narrated it, it was very impressive. We were traveling with you. We were breathless. We saw you run, and we were running with you. We were just wondering. Somehow you reached on time, and then you were there in the flight. So that was great. Thank you, Shamba, for that. We'll quickly, since we are almost at the end of the session, we have a request. We have another person who would want to. Yeah, we have Sabahin. Yeah, Sabahin, if I pronounce your name well.
Yes, yes, that's correct. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sabahin. So, and I'm a teacher at the Alliance Française de Pune. And
Right.
in the past, I've also taught English in international schools abroad. So, I mean, I have been dealing with storytelling, and it is
Uh-huh.
storytelling and storywriting. It's been one of my favorite topics actually to take up with my students,
Right.
because it is something that appeals to everyone, the young and the old. It provides an immediate connect with the audience. It's entertaining. It's easy to remember. So, all I wanted to say to you is thank you very much for bringing this session to us, and it's been wonderful and very what do you say, educative and very entertaining. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to many such sessions from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It means a lot to us and the whole team because we are trying to impart as much as we can. But of course, it cannot work unless we have people like you who are there to support us and to bring in their experiences as well. So thank you so much for being there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. And we have one last quick question that has been posted in the chat. What is the significance of storytelling in a research paper writing and in the personality development? So I'll just quickly, yeah, that's by, could you just unmute and you could say your name, please?
Yeah, sir. Vijay.
Yeah,
Vijay.
okay, that's from Vijay's side. Yeah, so Vijay, to respond to that question, see, research paper is something which is academic. So when we talk about storytelling, we don't delve into academic part of it because academic is something which is totally to the point, pinpoint, precise, and research paper, as you understand, we have to be very focused. We just cannot beat around the bush. When I say beat around the bush, what I'm trying to say is that in a sense, not in a negative sense, in a sense that when we talk about stories, we have the liberty to, tangent offshoot and go there in the imagination. It doesn't happen at all in research paper writing. You have to be really fixed with the number of words, the kind of work you want to do. So that is something very academic. We would not mix it up with storytelling. Yes,
That's
personal
okay.
development is something that is your part of your existence, how you talk to people, how you interact with them. And, that's why you must have seen that in events, in marriages and parties. There is one person who is always surrounded by many people and everyone is listening to this person's stories because that is so natural to this person. So I think with passage of time, we can develop those kind of elements in our personality as well, if at all we want. And then every time we say something, uh, it becomes our habit, our existence, the way we connect with people, and of course it impresses other people as well. I don't know if that is the intention to impress others, but that's a byproduct that people do get impressed and they appreciate us more for what we say, and the way that we say is impressive, that's enticing, it's engaging, it's fascinating, and I think that really helps us in developing our personality. So that
Okay. Thank you so much. I have another last question. That question may not be relevant here, but
uh-huh.
just now with the advent of artificial intelligence and tools like ChatGPT and others, now what could be the future of content writers, because they give each and everything uh, by giving it after giving a command or a prompt.
Yes, a very relevant
How
question.
do you see?
Yes, absolutely. Wonderful question, Vijay. I think I can reiterate quickly on Shampa's point because she beautifully said that these days we are scrolling through a lot of reels and content. Now, there are two parts of it. One is the content that is being created by AI, which is great. It is impeccable. But what about the human part of it? How do you dash in? I could have taken Nikesh's story from online. I could have simply done it. But, I would be missing in that if I were to do it that way. So what is needed is that definitely AI, we cannot avoid it. It is something that we have to use, but we have to use in a mindful way. We have to be sensitive enough to understand as to what it is offering to me and how do I add my bit into it. So I should see Vijay into it when I read your content. I should see Shompa or Sabahin, everyone. And your own presence should be unique into it. So definitely we can resort to all these technical gadgets and AI, but how do you distinguish it from the machine generated content to a humanized, personalized kind of a content? That fight is always there. How do you do that? That is again a big discussion. We can always delve into it, but that uniqueness has to be brought to Vijay, which I think can
Okay,
only be
got it.
brought by human intervention and one's experience and one's life that one lives and sees and observes with a curiosity about our entourage, about our surroundings, and that is what would set you apart from everything that is generated mechanically.
Sure, sure. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
I'd
So
like
I'm
to
adding here one of my point because all of
Yes,
you I'm I'm from IT background, so it
yes,
is very important to if you are able to to understand what you are searching on that prompt,
Right.
Yeah, if you are using chat gpt and other ai tools, so you need to first understand what you are searching on that
Mhm.
prompt. And if you are searching like this write 5 lines for myself, so it
Right.
will write simply write 5 lines. If you are putting like this I am from it background and I have done
Mhm.
my bca and mca from this university, now write about the 5 lines for myself. So
Yeah.
it will change your prospect and it will change your result as well. So
True.
if you have a knowledge, so it depends on your knowledge, it will give you the output.
Right. Absolutely, Arsalan. I think the research process has to be more precise and more, concrete in terms of the content that we want to generate. And of course, adding yourself, your own personality would make it unique
Yeah,
as your own production.
because ai tools is not intelligent tool. When
True.
we are putting those lines, they
Mhm.
are generating depend on that line.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely, Arsalan. You are right. Perfect. Thank
No,
you.
I
Yeah.
just
Sabine, you would
yeah,
like to say
that's
something?
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I feel that I mean, everything depends also on the prompts that we key in, and
Yes.
the results we get also depend a lot on that. And at the end of the day, AI is a tool, and
Yes.
I mean, I really feel that nothing can replace human like humans. I mean, at the end of the day, and we just basically have to know how to use these tools
Right.
to our benefit. And as you said, we have to just be careful while using them, and
True.
so yeah.
In a
Perfect.
my in a my IT background, all of them like says like this AI will lose like IT developers job.
Mhm.
So it is not true, because if we are able to understand what we are putting on that prompt, so
Yes.
that will generate only the output of that thing.
Absolutely. You're
But
right.
yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely.
and if we are making the code
Mhm.
from with the help of like ai tools, so it
Mhm.
will only show the code. Okay,
Right.
but you can't handle again and again on that on that prompt.
True.
Yeah,
So
and
you need to a developer
and
always.
Right.
also
Mhm.
chat gpt all they do make mistakes, so we have
Yeah,
to
Yes,
yeah,
you
yeah. We
cannot.
have to be careful with that. Absolutely,
Yes.
and it's good that
Yeah,
they make
because
mistakes so that our existence
it
makes a lot of
only
sense.
follow yeah, because he is following only the instructions,
correct,
not
Yes.
yeah.
True, true,
not
true.
the
But,
guidance.
but I think more than that, we'll just take a quick last point from Shampab, and I'll just quickly wrap up before that quickly. The point is that how hard we try, roping in AI, but in the end, when even when we are nourishing our children, we are giving food to them, and we have to quickly on the spot create a story. I'm not going to latch onto my mobile phone to say or to create a story, how to create a story for feeding my child. I'm giving him, let's say, some rice, and he's reluctant eating it. Of course, I can create my own story with all my experience about a story of the little rice grain who wants to go into my son's stomach or my daughter's stomach, and I'm talking to my son about this rice. So that way, that on the spot kind of creation, which is a beautifully created story, a beautiful imagination, that is done by human beings on the spot then and there. So I think that promptness and that unique approach can only be done by humans and not AI, at least at this point of time. Rest future holds a lot of magic for us. Let's see. Yeah, Shampa, to wrap up, one quick minute from your side, Shampa.
think I would rather say that, like the writer,
Mhm.
what he creates with his content, his vocabulary, his style, and the way he wants to connect with his readers.
Right.
But AI cannot, we cannot replace that thing with AI. No,
True.
it would match.
Perfect.
I believe like then
Absolutely.
those classics. Why do we still read those classics?
Yes, yes, you're right. Absolutely, Shampa. It really makes sense that even things so in the olden times they were written and they are so meaningful even in the contemporary situation. That makes sense for their existence.
There are new
Perfect.
stories. There are new stories. I always
Yes.
believe, a simple story can be narrated in such a way that it
Mhm.
has each and everything. Like it has
Yes.
what you said, a good introduction, a good,
Yes.
the body kind of thing. Then in the
Yes.
conclusion, what will happen? Each and everything. The writer is the person who is holding your one
Yes.
finger like that. We are holding his finger and he's moving around each and everything,
Totally.
the
Yes.
plot, and then another plot, and then
Yes.
another plot, subplots. So there
Yes.
is immense thing. So reading
Oh,
a book, I think that creates another world.
Absolutely,
Totally
yes.
another
And there is a parallel world that
people.
we get transported to with the expertise of the writers and these content creators. So, thank you so much for this wonderful discussion, everyone. I really felt happy that you have so much to say and so much to discuss on this topic, which is storytelling, magic, unleash your inner narrator. So, with that, we have come to the end of our today's session. I wish you a great day ahead, and I wish you that you have beautiful storytelling magic that would open up to many people, and you would share your stories in an exciting way with every one of us.
I would like
Thank you
to
so
thank
Yeah.
you,
much.
Thank
sir.
you
Have
so
a
much.
great day.
Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.
You have
Thank you.
this is
Thank you.
what you are doing every time. You are calling us for this conversation classes, and I feel like it's such a wonderful thing for this 1 hour time. I can hear from you. That's another kind of like creating such things. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much, Shamba. It means a lot to me and to our team. And of course, without you, we are no one. We are nothing. Thank you for your support and enthusiasm
Thank you
for
so
all our
much.
projects.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
Thank
day.
Have a
you.
great day.
Thank you. Have a
Thank you.
lovely
Bye
day.
bye.
Happy weekend all.
To you. Thank you.